Well, hello everybody. I am happy to be popping on in here today for part 3 of our little mini live stream promo series we're doing at the end of this month. And just as a reminder, this series is in promotion of my signature course called Healing Attachment Wounds with Mindfulness and Creative Arts Interventions. And it is currently available at 82% off until the end of the month. And so I'm popping on in here to do some live stream videos so that we can explore a little bit of what that is all about, and also to do some live Q&As, answer some questions. So over the past couple of days, the first live stream we did took a look at 4 phases of the romantic journey. And we talked about how oftentimes when we find ourselves arriving at these kind of catalytic experiences in life, that it's sort of like a stage theory. You may find yourself falling into one of those 4 phases. And the first phase is the wandering phase. So not a lot of insight or mindfulness around what you feel, only that you feel it. And you're searching for a sort of sense of relief or gratification without too much consciousness around it. You experience that enough, you experience enough painful patterns in your life, and either you do or you don't decide that you're done with that, and you're ready to accept the idea that maybe you don't know everything there is to know about yourself or about what's going on. So then you step into the exploring phase, right? That's when you decide that you may start to see a counselor, or you might pick up a self-help book, or you're starting to kind of surrender to the notion that there may be things beyond your immediate understanding that can inform what it is that you are experiencing without being consciously aware of it, right? So this is the exploring phase. And usually this is where you start to take in a lot of new information. And you may have insights into why you do the things that you do, but you're still kind of struggling with feeling those impulses. Then you step into the discovering phase. And the discovering phase is now, okay, I've read all the books, I've been in counseling, I know why I do what I do, but why is it happening now? Why me? Why now? What is the meaning behind all of this, right? So that's the discovering phase. And then there is the loving phase. And I believe the transition between discovering and loving is a much more subtle kind of transition. And the loving phase is where you have a grasp of what the meaning is for you, and you start to understand that it's not about getting from point A to point B. There's no quick fixes, and that oftentimes the best way to get through something is just to go down, in, and through it, rather than try to go up, over, and around it, right? So that it's really more about learning how to ride the wave, and that you are always going to be cycling between point A and point B. Right. So those are the 4 phases of the romantic journey. And over the course of these live streams, there was a question raised, well, how can you traverse from the exploring to the discovering phase, and then from discovering to loving? And to my mind, there are skills and things that you can implement in the transitional, let's say, in the space between you and a partner, of course. How do you learn how to speak more authentic, from an authentic place, as opposed to honest? Because I think most of us try to express ourselves as honestly as we can, but we're just not aware of how to express what we are most authentically experiencing, right? So there's some distinctions that we figure out there. But at the core of it is being able to identify, not necessarily what am I honestly thinking right now, but what am I most authentically feeling right now? And how can I acquire the skill sets to be able to express what I'm most authentically experiencing, as opposed to vocalizing a defensive posture, right? Or vocalizing something from a defensive position that is also kind of about criticism and blame, right? So those skills are all part of how to traverse those phases. And, we can get very intellectual with it, and I will create more content around that. But today, what I wanted to do was explore more this idea of how getting better in touch with that authentic experience that you may be having in a conflictual situation is actually where you build that foundation. So it doesn't feel like you're like every time you have a conversation with someone, you need to have gotten like a 720 on the SAT, right? The SAT for loving relationships. Wait, what was the right answer here? Okay. So part of that is that you start building a muscle and a practice within yourself, so that it just becomes an automatic response. It isn't now because your whole life have received conditioning that's trained you in the opposite direction. But today I want to go through a tutorial that's going to teach you how to access that from within, right? Before I do that, I also just want to make mention the second part of our live stream, we took a look at 4 types of love. And this evolved out of a question that was, how do I know if this is love? How do I know if the feelings I'm having are actually love? Why is it that they come and go? Or why aren't they consistent? Or if I'm feeling so overwhelmed and obsessive, is that actually love? Or is it just my reactive attachment system and things like that? And so we talked about 4 types of love. These were more or less kind of anecdotal categories that I've just observed in my experience. And we talked about one as being buddy love, which is sort of a companionable love that's typically circumstantial, not really that conflictual. It's just kind of more about being present for one another, usually through some kind of transitory experience. Then there's team spirit, and team spirit is the kind of love that tends to land us in marriage. Honestly, it's the kind of love that I would say if you were married early in life, okay, like your 20s, something like that. This is the kind of love where it's like, I'm looking for my teammate. I'm looking for the person with whom my values match. We want to live in the same place. We want to have the same number of kids. We have the same vision for how we want to structure the routines of our life, right? You're thinking about love as something foundational to the structure of your life. Okay. And then after that, we have soul shaking love. Now, buddy love can evolve into team spirit, can evolve into soul shaking love, but these things don't always happen in that type of trajectory. I just want to say that to say that. But when we arrive at soul shaking love, and you could be in a marriage that began in the phase of team spirit, or any of those things, but usually it's that one or both parties in the relationship are looking for something that lights them on fire on a soul deep level. They're looking for sort of a new level of emotional and spiritual intimacy, something around an energy exchange that cannot be defined by if you go to the same church, if you have the same financial goals, if you want to live in the same town. Those things they start to feel secondary to this desire and or yearning for stepping into a felt experience that makes you feel more connected to the essence of who you are and why it is that you are here and what meaning you're experiencing in your life through the vehicle of romantic partnership. And if you are already partnered, then this may create some rockiness in the relationship, particularly if it's a team spirit type relationship. Or you may be single and then meet someone who stimulates that for you right off the bat. But this is I call this soul shaking love because it's a kind of love that puts into doubt all your feelings, everything you ever thought you knew about yourself, right? You start questioning things a lot more. And that's why it's soul shaking, because it's intended to reflect back to you aspects of your own inner layering that it's time for you to now address. Okay. And so then there is ascended love. And ascended love is where you've kind of come to a new realization. You've peeled back another couple of layers through the experience of soul shaking love. And now you have arrived at ascended love, which is not so much about soul growth, which is antagonistic, really. But it's more about relaxing and sinking into a sense of beingness, and then being able to experience that with someone so that you contribute not this back and forth antagonism with one another, but rather you both now feel much more integrated and whole. And the thing that you are now creating between you becomes much larger than you could ever be on your own. And usually there's a quality of service to it, that you are working together in some fashion, that the very quality of your relationship serves as an inspiration and a model for how to commit yourself to some form of service to the larger whole, to the larger collective. So those are the things that we've been exploring over the past couple of days. And the questions that were raised were, well, how do I go from exploring to discovering, or discovering to loving? And how might I learn to receive? So when we were talking about the types of love, I was mentioning that oftentimes we struggle because we don't know how to receive. And especially if we're overgivers, right? We usually overgive because we feel like we're not getting enough. But oftentimes then if someone tries to give something to you, you can't accept it. And it's because we have these internal issues around worthiness and proving our value and our worth and making ourselves essential to somebody's life, because if we're not essential, then they're not going to love us, right? And that stems from conditional forms of love and ideas about love. So today, the really, truly, there's lots of skills and techniques and things that you can learn, which I do offer in my course, Healing Attachment Wounds, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that at the end. But at the essence, the core essence of this is that any skill, tip, trick that you can learn is going to be useless to you if at the core of it, you don't feel, sense, and or believe that you are whole already. That you already have within you all the ingredients that you need to live a sovereign life. And that you can move in and out of relationships and glean from them what is best about them in any context at any time of your life, right? And you can choose equally to commit yourself long-term to anyone in your life, regardless of the influences that may be telling you that your commitment is contingent on things, right? That you are in fact in charge of that. And so it starts with having the ability to communicate with yourself, the ability to sink into that knowing, not intellectually, but physically, viscerally, on a spiritual level, on the level of knowing that I am going to be okay. Right? I'm going to be okay. And my preoccupation with this notion that it must be in this format, right? It must look this certain way is actually a way of resisting receiving. It's actually a way of blocking the receipt of what it is that you're looking for. Because love, as much as we've talked about 4 types of love and the way you experience it, love actually has many more forms than that. And it comes to you through many more vehicles than that. And it is an internal process. Now, people access their internal content in different ways, right? So in my course, Healing Attachment Wounds, I like to access this type of content through cognitive reframing, which is where we take a look at what is your fear? What are your fears? What do you think you want? Because usually what you want is a Band-Aid for the fear. And then recognizing that the backside of that fear is typically a much deeper desire. Okay, so for example, I have a fear of dying alone, right? And so I think I want a partner because if I was partnered, I wouldn't die alone. But the reality is we all die alone. We all die alone. You are the one dying. So if you can sink into that, and if you've got all kinds of anxiety around that notion, sink into it, let it move through you, just live in it for a while. You might think, I'm living in it, that's why I want a partner so bad. You're not living in it, you're resisting it. You're wanting a partner because you're resisting the fear around it. But if you sink into that and you realize that that is the human experience, then that can stop dictating your every action between now and whenever that happens. Because then once you accept that, you actually step into, wow, okay, well, that gives me so much freedom. That gives me so much freedom because I don't have to worry about it. It's going to happen one way or the other, so why worry about it? And now you get to choose how you're going to write your narrative as the hero of your life. And if you're overly preoccupied with someone else being the hero of their life, and you are thinking too much about the narratives that they are writing, then what's happened is you've abandoned yourself and you've abandoned your own story, right? And you are no longer the hero of your life. And I don't know about you, but I want my story to be a page turner. My story is going to be a page turner. And I know that I am the one in charge of making that happen, right? Writing the hooks at the beginning and end of every chapter so that anybody who wanted to read my story would get hooked on it, right? And that's what it means to be on fire about life. What What would you need to do, to understand, to be engaged with, to feel as if your story and what is happening to you is as if not more fascinating and interesting to you as the story that may be going on in somebody else's life, right? Whatever that is what is going to light you on fire. And whatever that is what's going to put you in alignment with who you really are, the essence of your being. And once you can step into that, then that is when you are able to move from exploring to discovering, because you have a much stronger grasp of what brings you a sense of meaning in life. And that is when you can step from soul shaking love, which is all about, shaking up the snow globe, into the loving phase, and also into an ascended love where it's not about that anymore. Right? It's not about that sense of like, oh, I'm so stimulated and aroused by this person. Now it's like, oh, I feel like I've just come home. I feel like I've just come home and now I can get to work. Right? And isn't it so exciting? All the things that now that we've got that settled, I can just explode into the world. Right? So I said that I was going to do a tutorial around that today. And so I think at the essence of this is really a resistance to receiving, because we think we have to get the things that we need in a certain fashion and in a certain way. And when we do that, we become myopic. We're not able to see the range of possibilities that exist for us in the world. So I would have you it's all with the body. The body is the radio dial for spirit. This is where you're going to feel those shifts. This is where you're going to feel excited. This is where you're going to feel aroused. This is where you're going to be like, ooh, that's my energy. And I decide that it is time. And I decide that I am ready. And so my energy is going to exist on that plane right now. And knowing that that is what I have real command and control over, I'm going to create myself. I'm going to invent myself and fill myself up, while at the same time opening up myself to become a vessel of vibrating at this level for the thing that I am looking to call in, because I am that thing already. And once I step into it, embrace and fill up my circumference in that way, I've actually created tremendous amounts of spaciousness for the universe, to quote Eat, Pray, Love, to just let it all come swooshing in, right? So part of that is recognizing that you have an inner space. You have a vast inner space, right? Sometimes we think of our soul as residing within our body, but the truth is your body resides within your soul. And so what I encourage you to do is to just do this with me if you can and you're not operating heavy machinery. But just to take a breath, just simply take a breath. And as you do so, without any need to change it, just noticing the way the oxygen fills your lungs. And just recognizing that when you do, there's an expansion that happens within you. And you might even notice with every breath, now you're going to push the edges of that expansion just a little bit further. It might look like taking deeper breaths, but it's not necessary. Just imagining that within you, you have this expanding kind of landscape. And with every inhalation, the edges, the boundaries of that landscape just get wider and wider and wider. And just noticing what that landscape looks like for you, because there will be one. It does exist within you. And it is there waiting for you to arrive and explore it. And if we are to talk about this tangibly, the body becomes that landscape. Now, if you have blocks to receiving, if you have an energetic momentum tied up in this notion that of overgiving, then I guarantee you have a block to receiving. You may know already that it's hard for you to accept things, to take things in. If you're someone who withholds, if you're someone who withdraws and isolates, you also have a block to receiving. Okay. So I invite you now, gathering all your energy, your consciousness, your focus, allowing it to gather in your mind. And if you have any thoughts, worries, or concerns outside of the present moment, just imagine them entering into your awareness, just giving them a nod, and letting them blur into the background, almost like a painting on the wall. I don't recommend that you resist these thoughts because it will only make them stronger. Just let them in. Witness them like a stream flowing in front of you. You might have thoughts that are rapid. You might have thoughts that are gentle. You might have thoughts that just stream with a lot of velocity. Allow for it. Just allow for it. Going into the inner space doesn't mean you have to fight the rest of the world from getting in. Just allow for it, but observe. Okay. So you might see your thoughts streaming in front of you like a river. And then I would have you notice the bank on which you reside, where you're sitting, to see that in your landscape. And I invite you to get up and to perhaps walk along the bank of this river. Maybe you're gazing out at the stream. Maybe now you are looking at what else is going on in this space. But we are going to raise the question in our awareness, where is my block to receiving? Where is my block to receiving? And something will appear for you. Something. Might be a structure in the landscape, maybe something in the river, maybe something on the river bank. Might be an animated figure. Could be colors, textures, could be something shifts in your body. When you ask the question, you ask it because there is already an answer waiting to be discovered within you. And so simply ask the question, where are my blocks to receiving? What are they? And just receive whatever unfolds for you as it unfolds, without attempting to interpret it right now. So for example, I see a bridge appear downstream. And I got a sense of tingling in my chest, and it dropped into my, call it my sacred bowl, but that space between my hips. And now I'm feeling a tightness in my throat. Something has now kicked up in the whole of my torso right here. So in my vision, I'm going to continue walking toward the bridge. And the feeling actually intensifies as I approach it. So I look over the bridge. It's going over the stream of my thoughts. And on the other side, it becomes kind of blurred, almost like a mirage. And I feel hesitant to get up on the bridge. What am I doubting? I'm doubting that it's real. I'm doubting that if I get to the other side of the bridge, there will be some place for me to put my feet. I don't know what's on the other side. So I feel like I'm at a standstill in the middle of the bridge. So another question may come to you. Well, question's coming to me, which is, what guidance would you offer me at this time? What guidance might I receive for engaging with this block to receiving? And just witness what unfolds. If there are any shifts, if something pops into your awareness, just letting that come in. So for example, 2 hands in kind of a creepy way, pop out from the mirage and they touch my toes. So weird. Okay. And they're playing This Little Piggy Went to Market with my toes. Okay. And then the mirage, then it's almost like one of the hands sort of wipes the mirage like you're wiping mist off a window. And as they do so, it creates a rainbow. So I think that's far enough for now. So I invite you to take a breath, to take a snapshot as you do so of whatever you may have witnessed in your inner space in your mind. To breathe it in almost as if it is a fragrance, letting it sink in through your lungs into your bloodstream, pumping to the rhythm of your heartbeat from your crown to your toes, from your fingertips to your nose, just letting that become body knowledge, cell memory. Now I feel it all over my body. Just got this tremendous weight in my feet. Take another breath. I know I need one. And I'm going to count backwards from 5 to 1. And when we reach 1, we can release this practice. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So now I would invite you, I just kicked something up for myself. I would invite you with a pen and paper, or even if you want to take notes in your phone there or something like that, to just jot down what it is that you witnessed, what came up for you. And again, I'm very visual. I have a very active third eye. So it usually comes through to me in very visual ways. But that's not true of everyone. And it doesn't mean you're doing it wrong if that's not how it comes through for you. For a lot of people, it comes through viscerally. So they might experience a tightness in their body. They might notice a shift in their energy or a tingling or a sense of weightedness. Or they might have a thought or a memory or an intuition kind of randomly pop in. Some people like hear a message, not hear it, but it's almost like osmosis. They just like thoughts pop into their head. So some people feel like I'm struggling with this. I'm struggling with this. I have static in my mind. The eyes pop open, like they can't stop fidgeting. All of that is a witnessing. All of that is information for you, right? So you write down, I couldn't stop fidgeting. There was static in my mind. I felt a need to do it right. I wondered if I was doing it wrong. All of that is fantastic information. All of that is the right answer, okay? You're not doing it wrong. You are sitting on the bank witnessing that. And then that becomes information. And that becomes the seed of the next question you ask the next time you try and do a practice like this. Now, I am a creative arts therapist, so I'm someone who likes to take that experience and to externalize it in some fashion. So writing it down is probably the easiest way for most people who are not used to this to kind of process it initially, right? But then I encourage you to think about the images and the symbols and to engage with them in a more playful manner, because that's what's going to allow it to create like a vocabulary within you. And then once you've physically engaged with these images and these symbols and these feelings, then that vocabulary starts to build. It becomes much more visceral and concrete for you in your experience, both in the inner and in the external world. So I saw first image, what was the landscape you saw when you went inside? Even if you just imagine it, Also, don't discount your imagination. Your imagination is how this part of you speaks to you. So what was the landscape that you imagined when you went in? If you had to describe one, if I asked you to describe the weather inside your body right now, what would that be, right? Well, my landscape looks like this. Show me. Make a collage about it. Draw it out. Doesn't have to look like anything, right? What was that? What would it be like to be in that landscape right now? What did the river look like? Was it rapid? Was it still? Was it calm? Were there things floating in it? Was there animals and vegetation around it? When I asked you to get up and walk along the riverbank looking for your block to receiving, what was that like? Did things appear for you? What showed up? What unfolded? What revealed itself to you? To answer that question, right? I had another question that came to mind, which was, what guidance and or wisdom can you offer me regarding this block? And then I got more information, right? And I experienced these things visually, and I also experienced them viscerally. So I had this whole thing going on, like there was a tingling in my chest and it dropped into my stomach, and then my throat got tight. But by the end of it, it was this feeling of like water washing over you, and then it just drained into my feet, and then my feet felt really heavy, right? Which maybe isn't so ironic, since the vision was of someone playing piggy with my toes, right? So, how this comes through for you, there's no right or wrong, but this is an essential practice and process that you can start to engage with, that actually can be fun and playful and enjoyable, even if it feels a little bit scary. And if it does feel scary, then that's important information for you too. Now, I am a little more advanced in this because I do it a lot, but in healing attachment wounds, for example, in my course, we start by, first off, establishing a safe place, right? Establishing a relationship to your body that feels safe, that feels like this is my body. My body's here to be my advocate. My body's not a scary place where bad things happen to me, at least hopefully not now, right? And I'm going to reclaim it. And maybe my body was a scary place where bad things happened to me in the past, but it's here for me. It's mine. It's intended to serve me. And now it's time for me to go back and reclaim it, because it misses me, because it's been abandoned by me. And I might be scared to fight off the villains, but I need to, because it needs me to come rescue it, right? I want to just address some of the things we have here. We have some comments. My friend is 36. I still feel body attachment because I'm 22 and still a virgin, and it's because of the idea of sex and love combined together. He said placebo effect. I think that we all experience, sex as a way of connecting to each other in different ways. I think we all have different gradations of how intricately we tie our sexual and our emotional boundaries. And I think that many people have the experience that their emotions are connected with the sex act, right? Whatever that looks like for you, however that is experienced. And there's nothing right, wrong, mature, or immature about that. Some might argue that's actually a far more mature way to be, because you are connecting all aspects of self in whatever it is that you are doing, right? But without qualifying things as being more or less of something, I think it's just how we experience that boundary, these different types of boundaries that we have around experience. So some people just happen to be more adept at playing, expanding and contracting their emotional boundaries while participating in a sexual exchange than others. Others might feel their emotional boundaries expand in that kind of an experience. The idea that we would need to qualify that as being more or less of something, whether it's mature or immature or a result of life experience, is sort of unnecessary, I think. It depends on what you want. Do you want to be in a relationship, or do you want to feel as though you want to be in greater command of Do you feel as though you want to be able to have sex with someone and not expand into that emotionally? If that's something that you feel that you want to have more of an ability to do, then there's 1,000 ways you can take control of that, right? It doesn't happen overnight, but processes like this will allow you to do that. So I want to go in and I want to take a look at my sexual boundaries. So I want to go in and I want to take a look at my emotional boundaries and where they intersect with my sexual boundaries. So I want to go in and I want to take a look at how is my physical attachment system being caught up in the relationship right now, right? Okay. I asked my partner for a few years to explore a deeper intimacy with me. She reacted by accusing me of being too needy, then created some very untrue flaws about me, and then abruptly ended it. I reached out to a couple times to discuss it, and she treats me as if I'm a very bad person. I'm trying to sort it out. Narcissistic injury, typical avoidant behavior, or something wrong with me. That is kind of a classic avoidant, dismissively avoidant response. I shouldn't say dismissively avoidant. Someone who's fearful avoidant may also respond that way, but I think there is an aspect of avoidance there, because it's one thing for you to say that to a partner, and then a partner to say something like, I hear you. I feel like this is as intimate as I'm willing, wanting, and or capable of going, right? And so, being able to just express what it is that they are actually experiencing. It may be that I just vocalized what they were actually experiencing, but they couldn't access that to be able to tell you. So they respond when we feel, and that makes us feel threatened. And so then we respond by sometimes villainizing our partner. Like if we feel like we're not, then that person feels like I'm not giving you what you need because you want this deeper intimacy and I'm not capable of doing it. And so if I'm not capable of doing it, that must mean I'm not worthy or I'm not valuable. And screw that. I am worthy. I'm valuable. You're just wanting something that's beyond, that's unreasonable. And you know what? You're just blah, blah, blah. So it becomes this defensive response, right? And so to justify, so then the ego needs to justify itself. So then it will look for things in the environment to justify itself. So, well, I'm not feeling capable, ready, and or capable of going there, and as a result, it must be your fault, right? So this is always the ego's defensive response, right? And it's not good, bad, or indifferent. It's kind of like, it's just where somebody may be in their process, right? And you can decide, do you want to remain with someone while they're in process? You might. It may require, if you've got needs, for example, doesn't mean you can stop loving them, but if you've got certain needs that you're looking for, and you know that in order for you to commit a certain amount of time, energy, and effort, and perhaps physicality to somebody, you want those certain needs met, then you have choices to make. You've got decisions to make, right? But I think, this is not, I don't mean to say this with a very hard line. We all can experience compassion for where our partners may be, and we all have different thresholds for how much patience, time, and energy, real world energy and resources that we want to contribute to something, because we experience it as contributing to our expansion in some way, even if it is to kind of hold your own power and hold your own boundaries while allowing for someone else to explore what theirs may be. This is why I say that, I don't think there's a hard and fast rule. Some people learn these things in the context of relationship. Other people find it easier to learn these things about themselves when they are not partnered. But I think that we are different dispositionally. I don't think that you could say that there's one way to be for every human being under the sun, especially if we take into consideration, the influence of culture and other things like that. But if someone's not able to show up and say, I hear you, I just don't know that I'm there. I don't feel like we're on the same page. I'm not really interested in or willing to go there with you at this time. That's where I'm at. right? And then if you can have that conversation, that's actually a very valuable piece of information. If they can't have it and they're at a place where they're not able to show up in that way, then it's likely that that's like your first sign. They're just not ready. And sometimes if they are particularly defensive, it will come out in ways that feel narcissistic, because everybody who has insecure attachment has narcissistic wounds. I mean, narcissism is when you source your sense of self from the external world to such a degree that it's very hard for you to connect with any sense of self outside of the mirrors of the people around you, right? Now, all of us have narcissism to some degree, every human being under the sun. You have to have a healthy level of narcissism in order to wake up in the morning and feel like you can go to work and get the job done, right? But when it becomes detrimental is when you are really confused about boundaries and you haven't developed a really powerful internal ego structure. So people talk about the ego, especially in New Age circles, in sort of a deprecating way, but the ego is a fantastic thing. It is this filter that allows us to negotiate the internal and the external world. It's when it becomes rigid and it becomes overly defensive is when we experience this. Like, you express a desire for a deepening intimacy and someone responds in a way that feels almost aggressive because they experience your needing something as a criticism. And that is a confusion of boundaries, right? That means they can't really tell the difference between you and them. And because that creates such internal anxiety, they respond in a negative way, because that negativity for them is like, oh, like that establishes sort of a makeshift boundary for them. And that makeshift boundary then allows them to retain some sense of internal structure. This is why I think that, we talk about addictions and people will talk about relapse and, oh, I've relapsed, or, oh, I've this, or I've that. And we tend to have a negative stance on it. But I would actually say that often for many people, their addictions are what have saved them. In some cases, for many people, their addictions are what prevented them from taking their own life at one point. Sometimes for some individuals, it's like, I could shoot up or I could shoot myself, right? So I think that we need to be very aware of how deep and how far these things go. And so for some, relapse is actually a form of recovery. Recovery is the bad word because of the way we use it. For some, if they go far enough to an edge and they're not ready to go over that edge yet because they haven't developed enough of an internal ego structure. If they push themselves too far too fast, they can slip into psychosis. Okay. So in some cases, relapse is actually a way of trying to save themselves until they are ready. Okay. And some people will be in that cycle their whole life. And this goes back to another video I made, which is that sometimes unfulfilled potential is still fulfilling your life's purpose, because we are all here to have different experiences and learn different things about the world and the human experience, because all of that contributes to the collective experience as a whole, right? So you can't, it's how we release judgment, is to realize that every facet of experience is a facet worth learning about. Every facet of experience is a facet worth investigation. So this idea that one experience is more enlightened and better than another experience becomes kind of an arbitrary comparison, right? And we experience this most keenly in relationships, I would say, because you have two realities butting up against each other repeatedly and in close proximity, right? Okay. Okay. So I wanted to just share that. I feel like I went a little off the rails there, but I wanted to just share that tutorial and experience for you here today. And it is a Saturday, so I have to go attend to my child. I just plugged him in downstairs. So I would be interested if you're watching this on the replay, or if you watch this again and you do the experiential on your own. I'd love to see in the comment box there how you experienced it, what came up for you. You can tag me in it, and I can comment on that. And again, this is in promotion of my course, Healing Attachment Wounds, which is a 7-week signature course. It helps take you from feeling lost and confused in your relationships to stepping into feeling much more self-sovereign and calling in the kind of relationships that you want. And ideally, without having to talk in circles around your feelings for hours or even years on end with no tangible result. And as I said before, that is because what makes this program different is that we are accessing the body knowledge through things like guided visualization, through processing them with experientials. And also I offer cognitive reframing through psychoeducation and lectures and things like that. So, in our we talk about things like complicated grief and addiction as it comes to attachment wounding. We talk about the neurochemicals that get involved when you find yourself in a push-pull roller coaster relationship that impact you. We talk about 5 brain systems that can be involved with the ways that you relate to your partner. So sometimes it's not about you have this kind of attachment, you have that kind of attachment. Sometimes it is that you have a brain structure that your personality comes out a certain way because it's how you actually digest and process information, right? We also talk about anxiety specifically, 2 types of anxiety and how to process that through guided visualization. We talk about 2 types of limiting beliefs and how to dig into the false essential premises that you may be operating under in any given circumstance. And we also talk about the role of the body and the role that the body has to play with the processing of all these things, how you bring insight down into your felt experience. And also specifically, we talk about how to release rage, how to address anger, because oftentimes anger is typically what has blanketed any of those more vulnerable feelings you may be having. And that is also usually a tremendous block to receiving, right? So if you're interested in that, again, you can check it out in the caption of this video. There's a link there. There's also a ton of video testimonials from people who've taken the course if you're interested. And it's 82% off right now. That will be ending on Monday. So I do invite you to check it out now while you can. And again, if you want to respond to this, or if things came up for you in your experience, in your practice, you can comment below, tag me in it, and I will come back and refer to that in our next live stream series. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a great day.